We're about to begin in page 10b, continuing of our discussion in the Tractate Megillah, the story of the book of Esther, and now we're going to zoom in the Megillah Esther, the Esther scroll, the story of Esther. The truth of the matter, after studying the story of Esther many times, one may come to conclusion that it's a very sad story of anti-Jewish or anti-Semite sentiment of different characters, such as character of Haman, his wife, etc. But we should also remember character like Bigtan and Teresh, and people who are the other way around, expresses their positive Jewish sentiment. So the story of Esther, it's a sad story with a very happy ending. In a sense of a modern time, one may think, as much as you hear anti-Jewish sentiment here in the United States, there are voices, even strong voices, of people who are not Jewish, yet they express a very strong voice for the Jewish people. So as an introduction, I would like to share with you three sources in a sense of a American leadership in just past generation that influenced the American people, who are very strongly for the Jewish people. The first source, before beginning our study, it's the source from John Adams. John Adams was, he wrote in a letter to Van der Kamp in February 16, 1809, and I'm just quoting his word by word. In spite of Voltaire is the abbreviation of a vehement anti-Semite, I, meaning John Adams, I will insist that the Hebrews have done more to civilize men than any other nation. If I were an atheist and believed in blind eternal fate, I should still believe that fate had ordained the Jews to be the most essential instrument for civilization the nations. I should believe that chance had ordered the Jews to preserve and to propagate to all mankind the doctrine of a supreme intelligent, wise, almighty sovereign of the universe, which I believe to be the great essential principle of all morality and consequently of all civilization. Again, John Adams, February 16, 1809. The second source I would like to share with you, it's a source from Mark Twain, who lived between 1835 to 1910, and he said as follows: the Jews constitute by 1% of human race. You see it, by the way, in the Megillah, that he said, Yishno Am Echad. It's a very small, tiny percentage that's running around the world, nothing new. Properly, the Jew ought hardly to be heard of, but he is heard of, has always been heard of. He is a prominent of the planet as any other people. He has made a marvelous fight in the world, in all the ages, and has done in with his hands tied behind him. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, and the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and pass away. The Greek and the Roman followed and made a vast noise, and they are gone. Other people have sprung up and held their touch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now, or have vanished. The Jews saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was. All things are mortal but the Jew. All the other forces pass, but he remains. And he concluded, what is the secret of his immortality? Mark Twain, in the complete essays of Mark Twain, live 1835 to 1910. The third source I would like to share with you is a famous source from Theodore Roosevelt, and part of his autobiography that cite in Allen Quill, and it's called "What Did They Think of the Jews?" When I was police commissioner of New York City in 1895, an anti-Semitic preacher from Berlin, Rector Allward, came over to New York to preach a crusade against the Jews. Many of the New York Jews were much excited and asked me to prevent him from speaking and not to give him police protection. This, I told them, was impossible, and if possible would have been undesirable, because it will have much made him a martyr. The proper thing to do was to make him ridiculous. Accordingly, I detailed for his protection a Jew, sergeant, and a score of 2 of Jew policemen. He made his harangue against the Jews under the active protection of some 40 policemen. Every one of them was a Jew. So my dear friends, when we're about to study here the Megillah itself, we should always remember the happy ending. There are people who try to get rid of us, hate us like Haman, but Am Yisrael Chai. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, 11 lines from the top of the page, Megillah page 10b. And it was in the day of Achashverosh. Amar Rabbi Levi v'itema Rabbi Yonatan. Rabbi Levi said, in according to Rabbi Yonatan, דבר זה מסורת בידינו מאנשי כנסת הגדולה. This word, the beginning word of the Megillah, which is Vayhi, Vayhi, it's a tradition that we receive from the men of the Great Assembly. The men of the Great Assembly, it's 120 late prophets, sages, and other great scholars who, according to Maimonides, live throughout time, not in one generation itself. And this is the tradition we receive from them. כל מקום שנאמר ויהי אינו אלא לשון צער. In every place in the entire Tanakh, in the entire Bible, wherever the term Vayhi and it was mentioned in the scripture, it is clear expression of something that it's very sad. In other words, it's bringing something that it's very painful in the text. So here I want to bring you some example. If you take the word, the Maharsha said, you take the word Vayhi and divide it to 2 consonants, Vay, it's almost like a Yiddish Vay, and He, it's all language of mourning. Something said we're about to hear, about to say. So an example, Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, the beginning of the scroll of Esther, Vayhi, it was something said in the days of Achashverosh. Achashverosh is the name of the king that we discuss in the Megillah, This is the era of Purim, between the first and the second temple in Babylon. So at the time of the day Achashverosh, what happened? Hava Haman. It was the anti-Jewish, the anti-Semite Haman, who had in his mind to do what? To annihilate the Jews. It's important to know that this annihilation speaks about physical annihilation. Examples of Vayhi, since we talk about this term, Vayhi bimei shvot hashoftim. They said in the beginning of the book of Ruth, Vayhi, it was said when? In the days that the judges judge. So Rashi said the next line was Vayhi ra'av ba'aretz. It was a famine in the land, which means the beginning of book of Ruth, that written by Samuel, wants to tell us at the beginning of the judges judge, it was a famine. It was one event leading to the others. In my book Ruth Talk, I elaborate of the concept of Vayhi at the very beginning of book of Judges. It was published by Jonathan David Publications in New York. Hava ra'av. So it was a famine that followed. Vayhi ke'echel ha'adam larov. They said in Genesis chapter 6 that it was in the days when began to increase the human, the man, upon the earth. So Vayar Hashem ki ra'a bara'at ha'adam, and the Almighty saw that the wickedness of man was great, which means that the idea of Vayhi, when a person increased, when a man was increased, it's also its expansion of their sins, which created a self-destruction that eventually was a physical destruction, which is the famous biblical Great Flood. So again, you see example of Vayhi, of sadness. You see in Achashverosh, you see in the Judges, you see at the beginning of Genesis. Vayhi benos'am mikedem. And then it said it was when they journeyed from the east. So right away, Hava nivne lanu ir. So the minutes that they move from the east, they start building the Babylonian tower, which is again self-destructive way that they try, quote unquote, to control the world, or to reach like the level of heaven, the mighty. Vayhi bimei Amraphel, another example in the time of Amraphel, again is the book of Genesis. Asu milchama, the wage a war, that's famous 4 kings war, that result of the battle, Lot, the nephew of Abraham, was captured. Vayhi bimot Yoshua biricho. This example, many examples of Vayhi. We show you a consistency of saying Vayhi in a sadness. It was in the day that Joshua was in Jericho. That's Joshua chapter 5. And then they said, V'charbo shlufa biyado, and the sword drawn in his hand. So the text himself said in Joshua 5, sentence 13, Vayhi biyot Yoshua biricho. And it came to pass when Joshua was in Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. The man referred to here was actually an angel that come and want to give Yoshua a word of admonition. Vayhi Hashem et Yoshua, and the Almighty was with Joshua, that's Joshua chapter 6, sentence 27. And then they said, Vaymalu bnei Israel. It was a time that the children of Israel transgressed the word of Lord. So that's the famous story of Achan. After they conquered the first city of Jericho, they were not to take anything from the leftover, and unfortunately it was a fellow named Achan that he took from the leftover, and as a result, unfortunately, it was a dead of soldiers in the next city of Ai, and it was a crisis. Vayhi shechad min haramatayim. They said about Elkanah, beginning of book of Samuel. That's what we read in the Haftarah of Rosh Hashanah, that there was a certain man from Ramatayim. Is followed by Ki et Chana heva Hashem sagar et achmarot. You have the wife named Chana, the second wife, and he loved, but unfortunately she didn't have a children. That's like Hashem closed her womb at that time. Vayhi ki zaken Shmuel, when the prophet Samuel turned old, velo alchu banav bidrachav, so his children did not follow his righteousness path. Vayhi David lechol achav maskil v'Hashem imo, and King David was succeeded in all his ways, and God is with him. So they said right away, Vayhi Shaul oyene David, that King Saul have like animosity toward David, hostility toward David. Vayhi ki yashav hamelech bebeito, and it was when the King David sat in his house. That was the first book of Kings, chapter 8. And then they said, Rak ata lo tivnei habayit, which means God told him that you cannot build the house, the temple. Why? Because his hand was with blood. So now they ask a question, they challenge. We brought a long list of places that they said the word Vayhi and his expression of sorrow, of pain, of anguish. But here we want to bring you the opposite way. Ve'aktiv Vayhi bayom hashmini. But it's written it was on the 8th day. Where it was the 8th day, they said in Leviticus 9 that the 8th and the final day of the dedication services of the tabernacle. So it was a Yomi simcha lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That day was a great celebration when they dedicated the tabernacle before God, kiyom shenivru b'shamayim v'aretz, like the day that the heaven and earth created. So ktiv hacha vayhi bayom hashmini, here it's written it was in the 8th day. Uchtiv atam vayhi voker yom echad, and it's written at the very beginning of Genesis, and it was an evening and it was a morning, one day. So what we understand from Vayhi, that both connected to the dedication of the tabernacle and the idea of creation. So the Maharsha tells us that in both situations is expression of happiness. So now they ask a question. We said, you tell me that Vayhi it's a good, but Hashachiv Nadav Avihu, but because Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron, the fire came from heaven and toward the nostrils they took back their life. God took away, in that sense, their life. So that day the tabernacle dedicated the term Vayhi, and it was its expression also in that sense of a great tragedy. So in that sense we like try to show that it's the opposite. So now they ask, Vayaktiv Vayhi b'shmonayim shana v'arba'amot shana. It's written when it was in the book of Kings, chapter 6, and it was in the 418 years after the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the second month, is like the month of Iyar, that he began to build the house of God. Vayhi kasher ra'a Yaakov et Rachel, and it was in Genesis 29 when Jacob saw his future bride and wife Rachel. So it's something that it's very happy, right? Ve'aktiv vayhi vayhi boker yom echad. So it's written about the creation that it's the first day. והאי כשני, והאי כשלישי, והאי כטובה. There are other days, the second, the third, many instances, Vayhi, it's fortunate. Amar Rav Ashi, Kol Vayhi ika hache v'ika hache. Every language of Vayhi can be either fortunate or sadness. Vayhi b'mei eino el lashon tzar. It's not enough to say the word Vayhi. You have to use the second word in the Megillah. They said it was in a days, Vayhi b'mei. Vayhi b'mei, it's a language of sadness. Chamisha Vayhi b'mei havu. If you count, imagine how brilliant are the scholars, the rabbis. Without the computer era, they tell you in the entire Bible there are 5 places that they use the word Vayhi b'mei. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh. The beginning of the Megillah, they said, and it was the days of the king Achashverosh. Vayhi b'mei Shvot HaShoftim, the source we just mentioned from the first chapter of Book of Ruth, the days that the judges judged. Vayhi b'mei Amraphel, in Genesis 14, it was a day of the Amraphel, the king Amraphel. Vayhi b'mei Achaz, and it was in the day of Achaz, which is Isaiah chapter 7. Again, the time of the kingdom. Vayhi b'mei Yehoyakim. They said in Jeremiah, beginning chapter 1, in the days of Yehoyakim, which is the time, the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, the first temple, the time of the life of Yehoyakim. Amar Rabbi Levi. So since we mentioned all these traditions, that when you use the Vayhi b'mei is a sadness, so and we mentioned something from Rabbi Levi, because Rabbi Levi, it's an attribute many things, that's some of them. Amar Rabbi Levi, davar ze masoret biyadenu ma'avotenu. We have a tradition from our ancestors. Amotz ve'amatzia achim hayu. Amotz is the father of Yeshayahu, and Amatzia, Rashi said, was the king of Yehuda. So they are brothers. Maika mashmela. Why we need to bother to know it? Ki hada amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani amar Rabbi Yochanan, כל כלה שהיא צנועה בבית חמיה יוצאים זוכה ויוצאים ממנה מלאכים ונביאים. Any bride that she is modest in her father-in-law house, so she will have the privilege to have a kings and prophets from her future generation. Menalan, from where we see a source for that. Tamar, from the story, famous story in the Bible about Tamar. Tamar was the daughter-in-law of Yehuda, of Judah, and it's written, Vayir'eha Yehuda vayachshevea lezona ki chista fanea. They said in Genesis that Yehuda saw Tamar when she was on the intersection, and he saw that she is a prostitute because she covered her face. That's in Genesis 38, sentence 15. So they ask, Mishum dechista panea vayachshevea lezona, because she covered her face, Yehuda thought that she is a harlot? So it cannot be. Ela, rather, what you say? Mishum dechista panea bevet hachamia velo havaya dala izachta v'yatzu mimena melachim u'neviim, because during the time that she lived in the house of her father-in-law, she covered her face. So Yehuda never had the ability to see her face directly, and therefore when he went on the intersection to see that and he saw that harlot, he did not recognize her as his past daughter-in-law, since the Torah said that he lost his two sons, the first and the second husband. So as a result, for that merit, זכתה ויצאו ממנה מלכים ונביאים. So the merit to have a king and a prophet. So what does that mean, a king of prophets? So they said melachim mi David, a descendant of Tamar was King David. As you know in the book of Ruth, that you have Boaz, that he is a great-great-grandson of Yehuda. So the descendants of Tamar was King David. In my book Ruth Talk, you see at the very end, the middle of the book, but also the end, you have a chart with explanations how the descendancy goes. Nevi'im and the prophets, the Amar Rabbi Levi, that Rabbi Levi said, Masoret beyadeinu me'avotenu. We have the following tradition that has been passed down to us from our ancestors. Amotz ve'amatzia achim. They said that both, as we said earlier, Amotz and Amatzia were brothers. Uktiv achim hayu uktiv chazon Yeshayahu ben Amotz. They said this is the vision of Isaiah, son of Amotz, which means Isaiah was a nephew of Amatzia, and since Amatzia was a descendant of Tamar, so it followed of his nephew, the prophet Isaiah, and it's also among the descendants of her. So that by mentioning them, he tried to prove that that's the part of descendancy. I would like to share with you as a side note the famous Arizal, the great Ari of the 16th century, the great Kabbalist. He asked here a question. Question is, what Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said in the name of Rabbi Yonatan. He said that if someone is a modest in her father-in-law house, she will merit to have kings and prophets. They use a plural. So he said, how many kings and how many prophets we have since the ancient time? Give a number, X a number, not tens of thousands. We have the most, we can say a couple of hundred, maybe 1,000. Yet you said that anyone who's modest in her father-in-law, she merited to have kings and prophets. How do you explain it? So the Arizal said that Man Malchei Rabbanon, who are under the category of kingdom, the sages. So it means, when they use the term she merited to see a prophets, kings and prophets, it means that if she behave in a modest way, she will reserve the future generation, she gets the privilege, the merit to see a kings and prophets in a sense of great scholarship and great people of men of God that we call upon the sages. Man Malchei Rabbanan. That's what it meant when they use it. So examples of Tamar is just, or Ruth, it's examples from the Bible to tell us that if someone behaved in that manner, she merited to have the future generation a kings and prophets in a sense of future leadership or future scholarship. ואמר רבי לוי, דבר זה מסורת בידינו מאבותינו. We have a tradition, the following statement from our ancestors, מקום ארון אינו מן המידה. The space taken by the ark is not included in the dimensions of the Kodesh HaKodashim, of the Holy of Holies. In other words, it was a sense of great miracle that it didn't take any room. It's like one of many miracles that happened. Tanya Nameache, another following Braita, ארון שעשה משה יש לו 10 אמות לכל רוח. Aaron that Moses, the biblical Moses constructed, has 10 amot, amais, the size of the handbreadth, space to each side between the walls and the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Holy of Holies. וכתיב ולפני הדביר 20 אמה אורך. And they said in the area in the front of the petition was 20 amot long. וכתיב כנף הכרוב האחד 10 אמות וכנף הכרוב האחד 10 אמות. So you see that it means that the Holy of Holies measured 20 by 20 amot, and there was 10 amot of space to each side of the ark. So Aaron גופה האבקאי. So how the ark stands. אלא לאו שממינה בנס היה עומד. You have to say that it was by miracle.
Rabbi, can you show us from your book of Ruth?
That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. So you see here the chart. That's from my book Rootstock. You see here Judah and Tamar. You see that he's a descendants of Jacob, Isaac, Abraham, Terach. That's the way he came from. And you see that the descendants that come out of him. Yes, you see Yehuda and Tamar sons, and you see parrots, etc. And then you go down until you reach a point that you see Ruth and Boaz, and the descendants of Ruth and Boaz. You reach the David. So now this is the chart that expresses the whole level of descendants that come out of directly from Yehuda, and that's exactly what I try to prove in this book, in the Rootstock. I try to prove that that's descendants. What we just said in the Sugya, it's part of what we hold the future generation that came from the relationship between Yehuda and Tamar reached to the Boaz and Ruth. So in other words, all this circle that came from that sparkle of chesed, of kindness, that start with the house of Abraham, went out toward Lot in the wrong way and end up properly by this marriage of Boaz and Ruth.
to